Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Money Maverick podcast, where we expose the fallacies of traditional financial advice. I'm Tim Turley, the host for today's episode. We're coming to you from Silicon Slopes, Utah studios in Lehi, Utah today. We have a great guest today who also has the greatest dating and courtship story of all time, which we'll get to. But before we get into that, people always ask how to get a hold of us to learn more about true financial principles. And you can simply go to www.uniqueadvantage.biz. That's uniqueadvantage.biz. Or you can give us a toll-free call at 888-881-4445. That's 888-881-4445. So we're going to start with some questions today before we introduce our maverick for the week. What stops people from becoming financially free? And what are the main obstacles that prevents them from doing so? And why is mentorship and coaching important in the process of becoming that person you want to become? And here to talk about today is our guest, Sylvia Monsivais. Her name is so awesome, I have to say it again, Sylvia Monsivais.
And you said it right, which is awesome. So
Yes.
Good job.
I love it. Sylvia is an amazing person, and by the fact of what she's done in her life already, I think it qualifies her to talk about why coaching is important and how life works sometimes. She grew up in Provo, Utah, and she lives south of there by about maybe 20, 25 miles. And she has an amazing story. She is currently a promoter and marketer for Tony Child. And we're going to talk about that today. So this is kind of like part one of introducing what you teach people and how you're being mentored by Tony and what Tony teaches, because our part two is having him on here and get his insights. But we wanted to start with you because you have a great story and some good things to say.
Awesome.
So tell us about, maybe we can skip. We don't have to tell the long version, because that's actually, people should get a hold of you to hear the long version of your courtship. But it is so great. Now, currently, how many children do you have?
So I have 9 children.
And they're biological children.
Yep. I gave birth to all of them.
You gave birth to all of them.
It's usually a question that people ask me. Did you give birth to all of them? Yes. Yes, I did.
Yeah. I remember living in California for many years, and, we had 5 children. But in California, that's considered quite a lot. And we would get questioned all the time. People would give us crazy looks. Like, what's wrong with you people? Usually were the looks, right? So you know how that is with 9. But you have an amazing story. So before you were married, up to that point, you've got to give us the short version of your dating and courtship with your current husband.
Yeah, short version is, so I met my husband when we were in high school. I was 15. He was 17. We dated all throughout high school until he went on his mission. I promised I would wait for him, but I ended up dating other people and then getting engaged. And then that didn't feel right, so I broke that off. But by the time my husband got back, we started dating again. It was going really well. But, sometimes when people feel like they're too anxious or too stressed, they make those feelings mean this is wrong, which is not true. And so he ended up calling it off, which means we totally 100% broke up. We started dating other people, and we didn't see each other for like 3 or 4 months. And then I went to Hawaii for a couple weeks. And then by the time I got back, I decided to call him back because there was many missed phone calls from him during those 2 weeks. And so I called him back. We just started talking. Okay, it was the whole night. We talked the whole night long. And then
Hey, what do you mean by whole night?
Specific. So we started talking at like 8 p.m. I finally called him back. We stayed on the phone until like 12 or 1. I got hungry, so we went and got some food. We were walking around in a park. I know it sounds really interesting. In the middle of the night. And so at that point, come 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning, he's like, this feels right. And I basically said, yes, I think it feels right too. but I don't have to date you anymore to figure it out. So we either get married or you let me go. And he was like, oh, okay. And you can kind of see the wheels turning a little bit in his mind. And he's like, okay, let's just do it. Let's just get married. And I'm like, great. When? When are we actually going to do this? And he's like, let's do it today. And I'm like, done. Let's do it. So we went to the Provo courthouse and we were married by 10 a.m. And with all the things that happened on, you're going to ask me a question.
Wait a minute. So less than 24 hours after you started returning his phone calls.
Yes.
Okay.
And it's been like 4 months since we've seen each other.
Actually, not even 12 hours almost. Okay. So before that even hit, you're at the courthouse getting married. Okay. Now, your current previous boyfriend to the 10 o'clock marriage and his girlfriend.
Oh, yep.
Had
Because we were dating
idea.
other people. Very much so. Like the person that my husband was dating, she was fully into this relationship. I don't even think she knew I existed, to be honest. I know that the guys I was dating, I'm not sure how often I brought up my husband, well, he wasn't my husband then, but Hiram, right?
Yeah, right.
And so, yes, they're still there, but we were so much caught in the moment of like getting married. We just made a decision, like a lifelong decision, right? Like, and there was drama that we were having to deal with.
Well, hello. Can you imagine being the guy or the girl of you two getting the phone call saying, oh, not only are we not going out on a date tonight, but me and Hiram got married this morning, so we're really not going out ever.
Well, the funniest part about that is that we didn't even remember that we were dating people until later that evening.
Oh.
So they didn't get that call until like 6 or 7 at night.
What a phone call to get.
They were kind of blown away. They were.
Yeah,
it
guess.
was interesting. I don't know.
So
right?
there's even more details that is even greater. We won't go into those today, but it's a great story. And
It's a great
married,
story.
and you've been married for how long?
It'll be 20 years this
20
July.
years, so it worked out, right?
Yeah,
and
it
he's
worked
your
out
guy
really well.
still.
Yeah, he's my person.
Yes, I love it. Okay, so and you also do life coaching yourself. Tony's company is called Elevated Worldwide, and we'll talk about this at the end. But he has events. People come from all over. They're called pivot events, right?
Yeah, Pivot Point.
Pivot Point. And he has those usually every month, and we'll talk about that at the end, how people can get a hold of coming to one of those events and talking to you. But I'm really struck by a couple things. I watched one of his trainings, and there's some things that segue very nicely into financial freedom and being a money maverick. He talks about, so he was doing a training in front of a group of people, and he said, he didn't say the number, but the point was, let's say you make $100,000 a year and you wanted to add a 0 to that number for this year, 2024. So first of all, what would be the first reaction emotionally of people when they hear that statement, that you're going to add a 0 to that number?
I mean, with most people, they're going to say, well, they're not going to believe it. So they're going to have all the doubts and the reasons.
The doubt and the fear, right?
Doubt and fear. They're going to question, well, how am I going to do that?
That's the next step, right? Is the fear comes from, it's because I don't know how.
Yep. I don't know how to do it. Therefore, I can't. And that's not necessarily true because we're putting our ability into know-how, and the two are not connected. So when we can separate those two, we can say, well, I might not know how, but that doesn't mean I can't.
And what most people do though is when they tell themselves out of fear, I don't know how to do that, then what's their next thought? Therefore, I don't know how, therefore I can't.
Right. And so then people don't. They don't. As soon as you say I can't or I don't know how, your brain completely shuts down. It can't think. It can't use the gifts that we've been given, which is the gift of, creativity and using your mind to create. As soon as you have the thought of you can't, you won't, just because your brain won't be able to create something.
Because you've told it it's impossible.
Yes. And also people get stuck on this because they think that they have to work harder or they have to put in more hours. But that's not true either.
But why isn't that? We're all taught our whole lives that working harder is always the best way to get where you want to go.
Yeah, and where did that come from? When were you taught as a little kid? I think that most of us were, that you had to work hard for something. Like if you really wanted like a toy for when you were a child, right? Your parents were like, yeah, you can have that if you work for it?
Work hard.
Yeah, work hard. So we have this belief that we have to work really hard for something. And so when something is about to come and it's easy, we push it away because we didn't work hard for it.
And if we fall short of working hard, then we just give up. Right? Interesting. So Tony also talks about how many people that, let's say, make $100,000 a year, and the zero would be to make $1 million, right? What percentage of people actually do that? Actually add a zero. And he uses the number
It's 10%.
10%. And 10% is a pattern for a lot of things, right? That he talks about. So we can ask the same question of financial freedom. How many people, when presented with the opportunity to truly become financially free, what percentage of people actually do that?
It's probably 10%.
It's probably 10%.
Yeah.
People that make an effort. So Tony talks about there's two sides.
The left side and the right
There's
side.
There's the left side and the right side. So what's the left side?
So the left side is, well, let me start with this, right? Tony talks a little bit about this, but he opens it up with, Albert Einstein said that the greatest decision you'll ever make in your lifetime is whether you believe in a hostile or a friendly universe. So then the left side it starts with the belief of hostile, that a belief in either a hostile universe or a hostile God, that things are out to get you. And God is doing all these really mean things to you, right? Like that's where it all stems from, is that belief. And really it kind of stems from not feeling like you're enough. And so then all these things are happening to you.
They're happening
for
to
you.
you, so it's out of your control.
Right.
Therefore, I might as well not try, right? I'll just give up. Yeah.
So then what kind of thoughts does that belief create when something happens in your life? Like if you see in your bank account, right, that your finances are not where you want it to be, what kind of feeling, what type of thoughts does that create?
Anxiety and depression.
Yeah, the thought is doubt.
Right.
Right? And then the doubt leads to the feelings of worry and fear. And then the energy is then anxiety. And then
the universe is out to get me.
It's
not in my favor.
Yep. And then the things that creates is depression, disease, and decay.
And how many people wake up on that left side, the depression side?
85%.
Unbelievable number.
It's a really high number, but it makes sense though, because then that means when you're on the right side, that's 15%. And so shifting from that lack side to the abundant mindset, which is basically everything opposite that we just talked about, when you can live on the right side, which is everything is helping you for me. You're living in a state of confidence, love, faith, trust, right? And that creates more of that excitement, which then leads to momentum, wellness, and growth. Because that all stems from that you're more than enough, and there is more than enough, and that the universe is working for you. And so it is interesting how, only 15% either live there or frequently visit there, or at least know how to shift themselves over quickly to the right side, and how close that is to the 10% of people that are actually, making or putting in a zero to their number or making over, $100,000 a year.
And he talks about, that's really fascinating. Why is it so hard for people to switch from the left side of depression and I'm not good enough to abundance and I can do that? Why is it so hard for people to make that shift?
I believe that it's just because they don't have the tools.
So that's where maybe the mentorship and coaching comes in sometimes.
Mhm.
Accountability partner, whatever
Yep.
you want to call it.
Yep. But I think there's a couple other things that keeps people stuck from moving. And, because when you want to be on that 10%, you're making like $500,000 or $1 million, right? And what keeps people from making that much is because when you're making at least 100,000, you're better than most.
Yeah,
And
you're in the top 9 or 10%.
Yeah. And so it's being comfortable. It's saying, well, I don't want to push myself out of my comfort zone, right? Just because you get really comfortable with making 100,000. And so in my opinion, with what I've seen a lot with people, when I've interacted with a lot of people, is as soon as it's like a mindset thing or, personal development, I mean, we kind of know this stuff. I mean, the things that we've talked about so far, you kind of feel like, I've heard this before. This makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
But there's so many blind spots that we have, right? And until we can work on that awareness and so we can know what those blind spots are, like we don't shift, because we can know something, but we might not have the understanding.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Like when we take people through our planning process, it's not, we don't just meet once or twice. It's a process. And the initial meetings, they take a few months, and people initially are wondering, why do we need to do that? And it's because we know that they have blind spots. They don't know it yet. And it takes the foundational teaching of principles for them, not for us to point it out. They actually come to their own realization that there's blind spots.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the aha moment. And they have to come to that on their own.
Yes. Have you ever met someone that's like, oh yeah, I know my blind spots. I know exactly what they are.
And they wouldn't be blind spots.
Then they wouldn't be blind spots. It's like, they're blind because, when you're driving your car,
Mm-hmm.
you have blind spots. And if you knew what they were, they wouldn't be blind.
Funny, huh?
Mm-hmm.
Funny what people think and say. So, and Dan Sullivan of Strategic Coach fame, he talks about people that reach a certain level of income through their own hard work and their abilities and skill set, but they reach something called a ceiling.
Mm-hmm.
And when they reach that ceiling, they get stuck and they don't know how to get beyond that ceiling. And Tony in that training talks about one of the reasons why people don't think they can add a zero or become financially free is they think they have to do it by themselves to take the next step.
Yeah.
And that's what the ceiling is how can I possibly do that by myself? And that's when I just need to work harder, but I only have a certain number of hours of the week to become more financially secure. And what Tony pointed out in his training is, why do you have to do it yourself?
Yeah.
Right?
Yep. When it comes to achieving any goal, it will always be because of the power of people that you are interacting with, right? And the power of people is really important.
That's why it's important who we associate with, who we talk to, who we hang out with.
Mm-hmm.
Why we have mentors and coaches, right? And I'll be attending Tony's event here pretty soon. I had a great high performance coach myself last year, Steve Galley. He'll be one of our guests on our show too. And sometimes even though we think we're doing well, again, we don't know our blind spots, and it takes somebody coaching us or holding us
Mm-hmm.
accountable along the way to reach that next level.
Yeah.
And by the way, who else becomes affected when we reach another level of success after when we find out when we understand more who we are, when we know who we are, when we understand that, who else gets affected when we reach that next level of confidence?
Yeah, it's that ripple effect that can touch a lot of lives. I mean, first it's going to affect yourself, and then like your family, and then the people outside of you, the people that you influence, the interactions. I I mean, it's just that ripple as you work on that. But I kind of want to go back to that. Well, there's other question that you had asked, like, why don't people, break out of being stuck? Like, what is it that keeps people stuck?
Yes.
And it kind of goes back to my story at the very beginning, where my husband thought it was wrong because he felt that anxiety, that fear, and he made that mean this is wrong, right? And really all it is getting up against your familiar zone. Some people might call it their comfort zone. And one of the ways that you can bring awareness to this, to discover, like, hey, what is it that I'm really feeling? If you fold your arms the way you normally fold your arms, and notice which arm is over which, right? And then you do it opposite.
Really weird, uncomfortable.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's not right.
It's not right when you do it opposite.
Right.
And so you look at you're already trying to go back.
Yes.
Right? Because what is your brain saying?
I'm not comfortable with this.
So it says
it's
to
wrong. Go back.
Go back.
Go back to your comfort zone.
Go back to what's familiar.
Right.
And so my husband, that's exactly what he experienced. And that's why he broke off the wedding, right? Because we were planning it out.
Right.
And that keeps people stuck when they want to go back. Go back to what's familiar. Go back to what's comfortable.
So this is not what people like to hear sometimes, that they have to get out of their comfort zone, their familiar zone. But that's reality, right? We need to step outside of that to grow.
Yeah. So, I mean, if you look back to my story, we had to jump, and we had to jump fast, right? So that we don't have to sit, or at least my husband didn't have to sit in that really uncomfortable feelings.
Yeah.
But what's interesting is, as soon as you make that decision, as soon as we got married, all of the anxiety and depression, or, it could be depression, but all the anxiety, the worry, the fear, it just melted away. Right.
And you took action.
And so sometimes that's kind of how it is with money too. People are very uncomfortable with money or dealing with money. But as soon as you can leap and just start doing the stuff as quickly as possible, then you'll find that it just goes away.
Yeah, I can't remember the name of the book. Maybe you do. There's an author who the opening kind of prologue of her book, her opening introduction to her book is, the greatest fear that people have is becoming too successful. Or I'm paraphrasing. That we're afraid to be successful. We're afraid,
it's our light, not our darkness, that most frightens us.
Isn't that interesting? Well, that's great. Before we wrap up today, Sylvia, first of all, we want to know how people can get a hold of you and the organization. And then we'd like to give you the opportunity to give our Maverick tip of the week. Some practical, really quick tip that somebody listening today can say, here's something I can do right now. Here's a shift that I can practice right away. So before that, tell us how people can get a hold of you and the organization.
I would love to give my phone number. That's probably the
easiest,
best way to get a hold of me, just through text message. But my phone number is 801-787-4036.
Okay, great. Is that the best way to get a hold of you? And then what if they wanted to find out about Elevated?
Yeah, text me
and you'll give me
ask me about Elevated, and then I will share more.
That's awesome. So one quick practical tip someone can start right now, either a different way of thinking or doing, or what would you get a suggestion?
I think, just to expand on what I've already shared, is figure out, like, what is it that's going to move the needle towards your vision a little bit more? Like, what feels uncomfortable? And then do it quickly, and jump out of your comfort zone. And you might have to do it a few times, but as you do it over and over and over again, it will get more comfortable. And then your familiar zone will expand, and that's how you grow.
I love it. Well, we wanted to thank you for spending some time with us today on the Money Maverick Show, and we hope all our listeners got something wonderful out of this, something you can improve on starting today. Thank you so much, Sylvia Monsivais, for coming on.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone, for listening.